All right, y'all. It's wife guy segment time. You heard me right. It is wife guy segment time. So, Krystal the other day went on NewsNation. Now, I know a lot of you guys probably don't even know about NewsNation. So, NewsNation, I think it was founded by Dan Abrams, the guy who does Mediaite and the Law and Crime outlet. And I think he's behind that. It's the newer version of the show Cops. What's it called? It's like they have live cameras on police officers and they record everything that's going on. I forget what, Live PD or something like that. Anyway, so he's the founder of this network. And the whole idea behind this network is like, I've seen their commercials. It's really goofy. It's like, well, are you tired of mainstream media doing a terrible job? Well, come here for real balanced coverage. And so they sort of portray themselves as, we are the centrist people. So in other words, they think like Fox News is Republican, MSNBC is Democrat, CNN is Democrat. What if we gave you 50% Republican and 50% Democrat? It's this sort of like fake anti-establishment stuff where in reality, what they do is they are just like the most pro-establishment because they parrot the propaganda of both parties. You know what I mean? Like they're not interested in objectivity and truth. They're more interested in like, what is conventional wisdom? All right, let's go in the direction of conventional wisdom. So that's what they are. Now, this guy, Leland Vittert, is a host on the network. Leland Vittert is a guy who I was on his show on Fox News twice. So they brought me in. We debated something regarding Trump one time. And then another time we debated, what was it? Have the Democrats gone too far left? It's a now infamous clip of me versus some right-wing radio host who looks like a giant thumb. And of course, I run circles around him. And it was a lot of fun. But my impression of Leland is that he's smarter than most of the other Fox hosts. And look, there's evidence for that too. He basically sacrificed his job to tell everybody the truth that the election wasn't stolen. He refused to go along with the narrative that it was stolen, and I think that's why he was fired. And so, in a sense, I respect him because he's principled, right? Like, I believe in something enough where I'm going to buck the narrative and buck the orthodoxy on Fox, and it got him in trouble. So Fox let him go. He went on over to NewsNation. Now, in my experience, he's a relatively smart guy. He had some moments in our debates where he would ask a much more poignant question than the human thumb I was debating, the right-wing radio host I was debating. But he shocked me in this discussion with Krystal. So first of all, I was with her at the time. I went to the studio with them. And the whole point of the segment was supposed to be, let's discuss what's happening with Republicans and Jim Jordan and like who's going to become speaker and all that stuff. That was supposed to be what the segment was about. Guess what? She gets on air. Homie interviews John Bolton first. John Bolton, who's saying all the insane things you could possibly imagine about how Biden is weak on Iran and he's weak on Palestinians and, you know, this is pathetic and it's classic neocon warmongering garbage. She had no idea Bolton was going to be on in front of her. And then also she had no idea he's going to ask her a question about Iran and about the Middle East. And again, I've never had a bait and switch happen to me before, ever, going on mainstream media. Every time I've gone on mainstream media, they tell you what the topics are beforehand, you do some prep, you're prepared, and they stick to what you're supposed to talk about. They did a bait and switch. They flipped it, and they hit her with the question on the Middle East. Now, thankfully, Krystal's educated on all this stuff. If this was somebody else, they would have been caught like a deer in headlights. They wouldn't have known what to say. They might not know these issues inside and out like Krystal does. But guys, this does not go well for Leland. So he's ambushing her with a question, is Biden weak on Iran? Watch what happens.
Embarrassed by the Soviets time and time again, Carter reversed course. But it was too late. America saw him as weak, as did the world. He lost to Ronald Reagan in a landslide. Krystal Ball is here, host of Breaking Points on YouTube, former MSNBC host. It's good to see you. Are we seeing a shift in President Biden, you think?
Shift in what way?
Change the policy towards Iran.
I don't know that he's changing policy towards Iran. I think that he made a huge mistake at the beginning of this administration not getting back into the Iranian nuclear deal.
Right.
I think that the trip to Israel is a massive risk, given that our huge ally that he has said unequivocally that he stands behind and has a right to defend themselves and they're trying to rush aid to, et cetera, is in the midst of committing what the UN describes as war crimes, including a medieval siege. I think that the war that you and Ambassador Bolton seem very anxious to get us into in Iran would be obviously a political catastrophe for the president.
I don't hear anybody interested in a war.
John Bolton seems very...
He doesn't hear anybody, really? John Bolton doesn't want war. John Bolton doesn't want war. His whole life is war. He can only get hard if he starts a war.
interested in war with Iran, and not to mention has always been interested in war with Iran,
so
and leading us directly into World War III. So I don't know about his policy on Iran, but I see the view of the Middle East very different from where I sit.
Okay, so what do you make of what Jake Sullivan, the president's advisor, said, what is it now, 18 days ago or so, about how they view the Middle East? Take a listen.
The war in Yemen is in its 19th month of truce. For now, the Iranian attacks against U.S. forces have stopped. Our presence in Iraq is stable. I emphasize for now because all of that can change. And the Middle East region is quieter today than it has been in 2 decades.
Well, I'll tell you what mistake he made, which is also the same mistake that Biden made, which is also the same mistake that Trump made, was to try to pretend like the Palestinian quote-unquote issue didn't exist, that you didn't have millions of people in Gaza seething under a multi-year blockade, that you didn't have illegal settlements and occupation in the West Bank, that you did not have to deal with these millions of people who are under an illegal apartheid system. And so you had the Trump administration that moved forward with the Abraham Accords, again, ignoring that situation. You had the Biden administration moving ahead with attempted normalization of Saudi and Israeli relations, all pretending that this problem with the Palestinians did not exist. I think the fact that the world forgot that this was unfolding is a key part of the problem here.
My question would be, whose fault is that problem, though? Because you seem to want to blame it on Israel, and you want to seem to take away Israel's right to self-defense.
No, I don't.
That is so dishonest. Oh, my God. Leland, you're better than that. You are better than that. She hit you with 1,000 really good points. And then it's like, well, whose fault is that? You seem to want to blame it on Israel and take away their right to self-defense. She didn't say anything of the sort. Anything at all. What she wants to do, and what every reasonable person wants to do, is make it so that Israel isn't killing civilians left and right. In response to a horrendous terror attack where Hamas massacred civilians, Israel was like, what if we massacred a lot of your civilians? That's bad. Killing civilians is bad. Full stop. No matter who does it. All right, let's keep going.
I don't want to take away their right to self-defense. What I do want to take away is their right to have an apartheid state.
Which they don't. Which they don't. Come on, Krystal.
He said they don't have an apartheid state. How do these people respond to the fact that every human rights organization on the planet, even the Western aligned ones, are like, yeah, that's an apartheid state. How do you respond to that? Amnesty International doesn't count. The top human rights group in Israel doesn't count. God, it's so dishonest. He has to know that this is not up for debate anymore. Jesus Christ. Let's go back a little bit.
Blame it on Israel, and you want to see them take away Israel's right to self-defense.
No, I don't. I don't want to take away their right to self-defense. What I do want to take away is their right to have an apartheid state.
Which they don't. Which they don't. Come on, Krystal. Come on, Krystal.
Leland,
no.
Right now, hold on. Let me just say. What Hamas did, terrorists. Massacre.
Thank you. That's
horrendous.
Huge of you to be able to point out.
Innocent civilians.
It's at this moment right here, she's already obliterating him. It's this moment right here where he lost and it's impossible for him to make a comeback. Because he takes her pointing out the crimes of Hamas terrorists, massacring innocent civilians and children and taking innocent hostages, hang gliding into a music festival and gunning down innocent people left and right. He takes her saying, that's horrendous. And he's condescending about it and acts like, oh yeah, big of you to admit that. It's almost like, are you really against it? God, I hate that. So anybody who's concerned about Palestinians in general and Palestinian civilians, they're just going to smear as Hamas supporters. That's what that is. That's smug, condescending reaction where all he has is, I'm going to totally straw man your belief system and pretend like I already know every single thing you believe. God damn it, man. Really, what, you think she actually doesn't care about the civilians killed on the Israeli side, you absolute goon? The fact of the matter is he's making very clear he doesn't care about the civilians on the Palestinian side. Because he's lying with every word that comes out of his mouth. All right, let's continue.
Should not be targeted, whether they are innocent Israeli civilians or innocent Palestinian civilians, which you seem to have no issue with.
No, I have a huge issue with it. The fact of the matter is I've lived there for 4 years. I've reported on it. I realize there's an enormous difference in moral clarity between Hamas that targets civilians, which you agree they do, and the Israelis that go out of their way not to target civilians.
That's just a total lie. Look, we talked about it before. The evidence is in. Take Operation Protective Edge in 2014. The low number of the civilian death rate is 63%. The high number is 80%. Over 500 children were killed back then in 2014 with Protective Edge. With this new bombing campaign in medieval siege, it's already over 1,000 children who are killed and over 3,500 Palestinians who are killed. The civilian death rate this time around is likely going to be way higher than Protective Edge. Why? You shut off the water, you shut off the food, you shut off the fuel. People are drinking seawater to survive. Hospital workers are drinking IV bags. This has all been reported. There was the hospital bombing, but even if you say, hey, that one that they blamed on Hamas really was from Hamas, there's also a dozen others that Israel doesn't even try to say they didn't do. So they are massacring civilians left and right. They bombed apartment buildings and mosques and markets. Like, the idea that you still believe, nope, it is all collateral damage. Look, if you had a situation where it was like, you killed 95% Hamas and 5% innocent civilians, you'd have an argument. You'd have an argument. But that's not, it's the reverse. And so at a certain point, people have to realize, no, it is intentional. Guys, the Israeli president literally came out the other day and said, we don't think anybody in Gaza is a civilian. They backed Hamas in the year 2006, by the way, and there hasn't been an election since. And hey, the people haven't done a coup d'etat since then, so therefore, they're all Hamas. What about that comment, they're human animals, which came out in the wake of the Hamas terror attack? What about that? There is collective punishment going on in Gaza by definition. It's collective punishment. So the idea, it's like, well, no, they don't want to hurt civilians. Of course they do. They were doing collective punishment. Oh, it's so dishonest. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I keep interjecting. Let's let Krystal do her thing because she really runs circles around this man. Just run it back.
4 years, I reported on it. I realized there's an enormous difference in moral clarity between Hamas that targets civilians, which you agree they do, and the Israelis that go out of their way not to target civilians. There is an enormous difference between the two.
Is it to the parents of the 1,000 plus children in Gaza right now who are dead, that Israel theoretically maybe has less barbaric tactics?
So let me just
They've already killed more in Gaza than in the horrific Hamas attacks.
So
one atrocity does not
okay, you've said that 3
justify
times
another
now.
atrocity.
Whose responsibility is the fact that those civilians are still there? Is it the responsibility of the Israelis? Or is it the responsibility of Hamas that's setting up checkpoints to keep civilians as human shields? Or is it the responsibility of the Egyptians that won't let them through Rafah? Or is it the responsibility of the rest of the Arab world that will not take a single Palestinian refugee to allow them to escape a murderous regime in Hamas?
There is plenty of blame to go around. What I will tell you, though, is are you aware that Netanyahu, as a policy to try to short-circuit any efforts at peace and the establishment of a Palestinian state, intentionally propped up Hamas? Because he saw them as a useful foil. These are not my words. These are his words. That is why the Israeli people overwhelmingly want him to be out of a job. Because of that failure, because of the intelligence failure, because of the military failure. And now we're going to stand by.
Now we're on to Israeli politics.
We're going to stand by and say it's fine for them to drop white phosphorus on civilians.
Which they haven't dropped anyway.
Yes, they have, according to Human Rights Watch.
Thank you.
Oh my God. So he even denied the white phosphorus, which again has been verified. Early on, there were reports, people were saying, oh my God, they're using white phosphorus. And they were using old videos when they had previously used it to make the argument. So people were like, see, it's not true. But then later on, new videos emerged and Human Rights Watch and others verified, no, they are using white phosphorus again. And by the way, he had no response to Krystal's point that in 2019, Netanyahu was caught on video saying, yeah, of course we want to prop up Hamas, because if Hamas is the face of the Palestinians, Palestinians will never get a state. So we should support them. This is Haaretz, one of the biggest newspapers in Israel, were the ones who reported this. And they had op-eds blaming Netanyahu for the security failures and for propping up Hamas, which led to the Hamas terror attack, which killed innocent civilians. He has no response. This is a guy who bases his opinion on this issue on fucking slogans. That's what it is. Pull the drawstring. Israel's right to defend itself. Israel's right to defend itself. There's been no actual thought that goes into anything that he says. And by the way, when he tries to act like, bro, whose fault is it that the Palestinian civilians are there? And he brings up, well, the other Arab nations won't even take any refugees, and he brings up all these things. And it's like, really? Who's the main culprit in that scenario? Of course it's Israel. Of course it is. They're doing a permanent occupation of Gaza. That's not an opinion. They control most of the borders. Egypt controls the other border. But it's a permanent police state, no political rights, no human rights whatsoever. In the West Bank, there's the illegal settlers, the ultra-Orthodox illegal settlers who are razing Palestinian villages to the ground with bulldozers and then just stealing their land. People come from the U.S. There's a video of a guy from Brooklyn who waltzes in on the West Bank. He's like, I'm just going to take your land because if I don't take it, somebody else is going to take it. So what do you want me to do? Like, who are we kidding here? Of course, Israel is mostly to blame. Should, the Arab nations take refugees? Sure. Should we take some refugees? Sure. But look, people are afraid that they already told 1 million Palestinians to go from North Gaza to South Gaza. And then it's like, well, people are afraid it's another Nakba, right? They're never going to be able to go back to their homes. So they don't want to go to another country. They want their homes, and they also want political and human rights at the same time. Oh my God. She did a phenomenal job. This was an amazing, amazing video. I was watching it live in like the green room, and the entire time I'm like, damn. And I knew when it was over, I was like, ugh, that was not good. In fact, I was afraid they wouldn't even post the video because he didn't do well. But thankfully, NewsNation did. So I guess I don't know how much control Leland has over what gets put out on NewsNation. But this is definitely the most views a NewsNation video has gotten in a very, very long time. And of course, all the comments are massively, massively pro-Krystal, as they should be. And I think she handled it phenomenally well. But again, she went in there expecting a conversation about Jim Jordan and the Republican chaos with them trying to get a speaker, and she was ambushed with this. Little did he know what he had coming his way. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.